Right, I've got a couple of Norton oil tanks here. These are from like 71 through 76. And the reason I'm doing this is to give you an idea of what I do to overcome problems with Norton oil tank. The problems exist because of the piss poor mounts that they put on the top, which is similar to this sort of thing, a little hexagon shaped mount that the factory supply and all aftermarket people do, but it's pretty near hopeless. I tend to run this little mount I got from Alibaba, it's a 6mm bolt, and a little bolt inside and a nut on the shank, but it's about the same length as the stock one. This one there is much like a Harley Davidson, like a shovel head oil tank mount, but it's a bit bigger in the bolt and just a little bit longer, but it's very similar to, I sometimes use the Harley one. Now the reason I go that way is because, like I said, it's a piss poor mount that they make and they break, and that allows the oil tank to slop about. And when the oil tank is slopping about, this bottom mount, as you can see here, sometimes they can crack where the weld meets the body of the tank, and then you'll get a bit of a persistent leak. You wonder what the hell's going on, and it's just weeping away there at that crack. And that's because when they do put in the bottom here, that mount there sits on top of this little hole, which is on your battery tray. This is that 71 through 76 style battery tray, and they have a grommet in here and a little steel bush and a bolt. Well, the bolt comes up from underneath, you tighten it all up, and then when those top mounts aren't doing anything, the oil tank's flopping around and shaking backwards and forwards and putting pressure on that bottom lug here because the bolt is tight into there. So in order to get away from that, I changed the mounts to similar to these things, or a little bit better mount, and then after repairing the oil tank by brazing around the perimeter of the junction there, I will just screw a bolt into this, a 1/4 inch 24 bolt, and cut the head off it and leave about 3/4 of an inch hanging out. And then I fit a new grommet into here, and then when you feed the tank in through the frame and then down in with that pin, what's become now a locating pin, into the grommet, and then you fit your two new top mounts, like something like that, something a bit decent. Well, then the whole tank is a little bit more stable, but it also has a little bit of room to play downstairs where it's not being held in place, and therefore should reduce the chance of a fracture again at that point there. And the other thing you can see with these two tanks is one's quite nice in that front tab is straight, the rear tab is still on it. You can see the rear tab there. Now in the case of this tank, old knuckle dragger has had a problem with his tank, so he's bent that forward and the back tank mount is broken off. And probably because when these two standard mounts broke, then he tried to figure out a way to mount this tank to the frame, and instead of using the isolating mounts like those, he's then used just a rubber bush and a bolt through the tank and the frame, which doesn't do anything. All that's doing is basically rigid mounting your tank to the frame. Even though there's a bit of rubber between it, doesn't mean shit unless you have a proper isolating mount. So then when it's been jiggling around for a whole long time and it's vibrating and carrying on because it's rigidly mounted, that tab will break off. I'm not exactly sure what he was trying to achieve with this lot, but you can see there's quite a bit of difference. So this is a repairable tank, and it's got a home. So it's amazing what some people will do instead of the right thing. Anyway, so that's what I do with a Commando 71 through 76 tank. The earlier tanks in the central mount, directly behind the carburetors, it's rigidly mounted to its own battery tray, and it's not a problem. And the earlier ones before that, the long tanks that you find on the early fastbacks and a couple other models in there, like an R model and I think the first S model maybe. No, not the first S model, can't think. But anyway, the long range fastback I think had it. They're long, you know, 1.5 times the length of the side cover, and the oil tank wraps around the front down tube. So they're a slightly different thing again, and they don't normally give a problem. So, but anyway, if you're looking to try and make your tank so that it doesn't give you any more problems in the future, find a better tank mount, repair the bottom if it needs it, and just put a pin in it with a new grommet and let it float at the bottom and sit nicely, nice and firmish at the top, but still have room to move and reduce any vibration getting to the tank. Anyway, thanks for watching.